Why has Bumpy Johnson's courtroom speech been kept secret for 60 years? Because some truths are too dangerous to record, some words too powerful to preserve, and some moments too revolutionary to let the public hear. But today, you're going to hear what really happened in that Manhattan courtroom on March 14, 1963. The speech that changed American justice forever. The 5 minutes that terrified the government so much they've spent 6 decades making sure you never learned what Bumpy Johnson actually said. Manhattan Criminal Court, Courtroom 4B, March 14, 1963. Judge Harold Whitmore had sentenced thousands of criminals during his 18-year career. He'd heard every excuse, every plea, every desperate attempt to avoid justice. And today, he was about to sentence Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson to 15 years in federal prison. The charges were serious: conspiracy, racketeering, operating an illegal gambling enterprise. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdict was unanimous. This should have been routine. Another dangerous criminal removed from society. Another victory for law and order. But nothing about Bumpy Johnson was ever routine. The courtroom was packed, not just with media and spectators, but with something unusual for 1963. Black professionals, doctors, lawyers, teachers, ministers, business owners, community leaders, all sitting quietly in the gallery waiting. Judge Whitmore later admitted he'd never seen such a distinguished audience for a criminal sentencing. District Attorney Charles Morrison stood to address the court. Morrison was ambitious, politically connected, and planning to use Bumpy's conviction as a stepping stone to higher office. "Your Honor," Morrison began, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom, "Ellsworth Johnson represents everything wrong with our urban communities. He is a criminal who has corrupted an entire neighborhood, who has profited from the misery of his own people, who has made a mockery of law and order in Harlem." Morrison continued for 12 minutes, describing Bumpy as a cancer on society, demanding maximum sentencing, promising that justice would finally be served. When Morrison finished, the courtroom remained silent. Judge Whitmore prepared to deliver the sentence. "Mr. Johnson, please rise." Bumpy stood slowly, 58 years old, wearing a tailored navy suit, carrying himself with the quiet dignity that had defined his entire life. No fear in his eyes, no desperation in his posture, just calm determination. "Mr. Johnson," Judge Whitmore continued, "you have been found guilty on all counts. The prosecution has recommended 15 years in federal prison, and I am inclined to agree. Before I pass sentence, do you have anything to say?" In thousands of sentencings, this question was purely ceremonial. Defendants mumbled apologies, begged for mercy, or stayed silent. Bumpy Johnson did something different. "Yes, Your Honor, I do have something to say, something that needs to be said in this courtroom, in this moment, before these witnesses." Judge Whitmore nodded, expecting a brief plea for leniency. What happened next lasted 5 minutes and 17 seconds and changed American justice forever. Bumpy walked to the center of the courtroom, turned to face not the judge, but the packed gallery. When he spoke, his voice was clear, measured, and absolutely fearless. "Your Honor, the prosecutor calls me a criminal. He says I've corrupted Harlem, that I've profited from misery, that I represent everything wrong with urban communities." Bumpy paused, scanning the faces in the courtroom. "I want to ask this court a question. Who built the buildings in Harlem that black families are forced to live in? White landlords. Who owns the businesses that charge us twice as much for food and clothing? White merchants. Who runs the banks that refuse to give us loans to buy homes or start businesses? White bankers. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even court reporters stopped typing. Who controls the police that arrest our children for crimes that white children commit without consequence? Who runs the schools that fail to educate our community while providing excellent education in white neighborhoods? Who makes the laws that punish crack cocaine 100 times more severely than powder cocaine, even though they're essentially the same drug? Judge Whitmore started to interrupt, but Bumpy continued. I'm called a criminal for running numbers games, but the state of New York runs a lottery. I'm called a criminal for charging interest on loans, but banks charge interest every day. I'm called a criminal for protecting my community from outside threats, but the police are supposed to do that, and they don't. Bumpy's voice grew stronger, more passionate. So I ask this court, who is the real criminal? The man who provides jobs for hundreds of people when legitimate employment is denied to us? The man who protects a community when official protection is deliberately withheld? The man who builds economic opportunities when legal opportunities are systematically blocked? The gallery was transfixed. Some people were quietly crying, others were nodding in recognition. Your Honor, I have spent my entire life in a system designed to ensure I would fail. I was denied quality education because of my skin color. I was denied legitimate employment opportunities because of my race. I was denied bank loans, housing options, business partnerships, every legal path to success that white Americans take for granted. Bumpy turned back to face Judge Whitmore directly. So I created my own system. A system where hard work was rewarded regardless of color, where intelligence and loyalty mattered more than family name or social connections, where people could earn respect through character rather than inherit it through privilege. The prosecutor started to object, but Judge Whitmore waved him silent. Mr. Johnson, continue. Thank you, Your Honor. Here's what I want this court to understand. Every crime I've been convicted of, every illegal activity I've engaged in, exists because the legal alternatives were deliberately kept from me and my community. Bumpy's voice became quieter, more intense. If there had been legitimate opportunities, I would have taken them. If there had been legal ways to build wealth and protect my community, I would have used them. If the system had provided justice and opportunity equally, I would have been a law-abiding citizen. He paused, letting his words sink in. But this system wasn't designed for people like me to succeed legally. It was designed to ensure we would fail and then to punish us for failing. The courtroom was so quiet, you could hear people breathing. So yes, Your Honor, I am a criminal. But I am a criminal created by a criminal system. And until this country provides equal opportunity under law, until justice truly becomes blind to color, there will be more men like me. Bumpy looked around the courtroom one final time. You can sentence me to 15 years, or 50 years, or life in prison. But you cannot imprison the truth of what I've said here today. And you cannot stop the changes that are coming to this country. He returned to his seat. The courtroom remained silent for nearly a minute. Judge Whitmore later said those were the longest 60 seconds of his judicial career. What happened next shocked everyone present. Judge Whitmore cleared his throat, shuffled his papers, looked at Bumpy Johnson for a long moment. Mr. Johnson, in 30 years on the bench, I have never heard a defendant speak with such clarity about the systemic issues underlying criminal behavior. Your words have given this court much to consider." The prosecutor looked confused. The defense attorney was stunned. "While I cannot ignore the crimes you've committed, I also cannot ignore the context you've provided for understanding why those crimes occurred." Judge Whitmore paused again. "Therefore, I am reducing your sentence to 5 years, and I am recommending that you serve that sentence in a minimum security facility where you can continue your education and prepare for rehabilitation." The gallery erupted. People were applauding, crying, embracing each other. But the real shock came when Judge Whitmore continued speaking. "Furthermore, I am ordering that a full transcript of today's proceedings, including Mr. Johnson's complete statement, be forwarded to the Department of Justice, to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and to the President's Commission on Civil Rights." The prosecutor jumped up. "Your Honor, with all due respect, such distribution of criminal proceedings is highly unusual." Judge Whitmore cut him off. "Mr. Morrison, what this court heard today was not just a criminal's plea for mercy. It was an indictment of American justice itself, and I believe our government leaders need to hear it." That evening, Judge Whitmore went home and wrote a detailed memo about the sentencing. He described Bumpy's speech as the most articulate and devastating critique of institutional racism I have ever encountered. He recommended that Bumpy's words be studied by legal scholars, civil rights leaders, and government officials working on racial equality issues. But that memo never reached its intended recipients. Within 48 hours, Judge Whitmore received a visit from Justice Department officials. They explained that distributing transcripts of criminal proceedings could compromise ongoing investigations and national security. The official transcript was sealed. Copies were confiscated. Court reporters were instructed to clarify their notes, and Bumpy Johnson's 5-minute speech disappeared from official records. For 60 years, the government has claimed those transcripts were lost in a filing error, that the court reporters' notes were damaged by water, that no recording devices were present that day. But people who were in that courtroom remember every word. They remember how Bumpy Johnson turned a criminal sentencing into a masterclass on systemic racism, how he forced a federal judge to confront the contradictions in American justice, how he spoke truths that were so powerful, so dangerous to the established order that they had to be erased from history. Judge Whitmore served 12 more years on the bench. He never spoke publicly about Bumpy Johnson's speech, but colleagues noticed he became much more lenient with defendants from disadvantaged communities. Bumpy served 4 years of his 5-year sentence. When he was released in 1967, he found a country in the middle of massive social change, civil rights legislation, voting rights, urban renewal programs, changes that many people attributed to the moral leadership of figures like Martin Luther King Jr., and political pressure from organized demonstrations. But people in Harlem knew the truth. Some of those changes began in Courtroom 4B on March 14, 1963, when Bumpy Johnson forced America's justice system to look in a mirror and see its own contradictions. When he spoke words so powerful, they had to be hidden. Truths so dangerous they had to be denied. Arguments so compelling they had to be erased. Because sometimes the most effective civil rights speech isn't delivered at a march or a rally. Sometimes it's delivered by a criminal in a courtroom, speaking truth to power with nothing left to lose. And sometimes the most dangerous words are the ones that expose how a criminal system creates criminals. That's why Bumpy Johnson's speech has been secret for 60 years, because some truths are too powerful to let the people hear. But today you heard them anyway.